I'm 28, and this was 2 years ago. It was just a few days before Christmas, but I had taken the entire week off of work, or in person work. At my job, we could essentially schedule when we'd actually come into the office, and I'd managed to have enough remote days racked up to be able to work from home this whole week. I knew there was supposed to be a big winter storm hitting the town around this week, and with the holiday and everything, I just wanted to stay home and have some more chill work days. Our company navigated remote work by basically just saying we had to get our work done by its deadline, and aside from that, it was up to us how we wanted to go about it. There were a few more rules and stuff, but this meant I could really work whatever schedule I wanted. I always preferred sleeping in and working late into the night. This day, I started work around noon. The first several hours were slow and calm, I guess. I sipped on my coffee and tried to get some work done. Over the course of those hours, the wind got increasingly heavier, slamming into the window next to me, and snow slowly began coming down. By 3 or 4, it was already dark outside, from the clouds overhead and all the snow flooding on top of the neighborhood. I was gonna go out to grab dinner, but with the roads being the way they were, I decided to stay in for the rest of the night. I worked at my desk for another couple hours. The sun had set and the winter storm had come in at full force. I left the window shades open so I could watch the snow fall from my desk, but out of nowhere, a light flickered outside. I looked over and saw a thin beam of light moving around. It was for sure a flashlight. I leaned back from my desk and looked at the window for maybe 10 seconds, watching the flashlight move around outside the window, before getting curious enough to get up and walk over to the window to see what was going on. I mean, it had to be freezing cold. Why was anyone out there? I peered outside the window, trying to look down the side of my house. I spotted the light, but before I could trace it back to whoever was shining it, it turned off. Or maybe went behind something. I couldn't tell. It was too dark, and the snow blocked pretty much my whole view. With nothing else to see, I sat back down. Honestly, I think I assumed some neighbor might have lost a pet out in the storm, or was just looking for something in general. I didn't worry much about it, and tried to focus back on my work while the storm continued outside. Over the next 2-ish hours, the house constantly creaked and settled, but several times I thought I'd heard something slightly louder and more distinct, enough so for me to stop and look away from my desk, hoping to hear it again and figure out what it was. I didn't, but how could it not be the house just making noises? The thought that it was anything else seemed really far-fetched. That was until there was a much louder thud sound. It sounded more like something breaking than just a hit against the wall, let alone the house settling in the wind. And it sounded like it was inside the house. I got up from my desk and walked into the hallway, hearing nothing, and then moving downstairs. Everything looked and sounded normal, not that I could hear too much over the heavy winds, but there weren't any more loud thuds. Honestly, I wasn't scared enough to do a full-on search through every section of the house, not without any other noises or anything. So I started to head back up to my office, making it nearly to the top of the steps, when suddenly there was a click sound and the whole house went dark. The power cut out. I froze in place for a second. The entire house was pitch black. With the snowstorm outside, no light was even coming in through the windows. I couldn't even see my own hands in front of my face. I thought the storm had to have messed with the power, or maybe tripped the breaker. I began slowly moving back down the stairs, feeling for every step as I carefully and blindly made my way down to the lower hallway. The basement door, which led to the breaker box, was at the far end of this hallway, so I started following the wall, tracing my hand against it to keep myself going the right way, when I started to hear something. I stopped walking. It was something moving, sort of muffled, and from behind the basement door. It got closer and closer until suddenly there was the quiet creak of the basement door opening. I could feel my eyes get wider as I stared down the darkness-filled hallway. I took one step back and quietly slipped through the open bathroom door that was right next to me. I still couldn't see, and I felt like closing the door would give me away, so I left it open. Slow, quiet footsteps began walking down the hallway. I was holding my breath, trying not to make a sound. The footsteps came closer and closer until I felt they were just outside the bathroom I was in. Then the footsteps passed right by the open doorway. I never even saw them, walking just 2 or 3 feet from me. That's how incredibly dark it was. The footsteps continued to slowly move through the hallway until they reached the stairs, and from then on, it was carpet, so I couldn't hear anything at all. Suddenly, the sound of the snowstorm outside took over my hearing again, almost feeling amplified by the emptiness inside the home. The person could have stopped walking and still been standing right at the bottom of the stairs, but I took the chance that they most likely continued upstairs, and I decided to make a run for it. I left the bathroom and blindly moved to the other side of the home, sticking my hands out to try not to slam into a wall. I made it to the garage door, grabbed my keys, and left out the side door to get into my car in the driveway. I drove away and used the SOS device in my car to get in contact with the police. No surprise, the person was gone when they got there. From what the cops could find, after breaking in and turning off the power, whoever it was had essentially went straight upstairs and into the office, then to the bedroom, and nowhere else. Which meant this person was definitely there looking for me. What's really unsettling is the person most likely knew me and knew the layout of my house enough to walk perfectly straight through it in the dark and to go straight upstairs to my office where they knew I'd be. Could have even been someone I talked to regularly that I had no idea had horrible intentions. It made me question everything. I moved away, having paranoia about essentially every coworker or friend that I wasn't super close with. Since moving, I haven't had anything happen. Hopefully, I don't ever have any updates to give, but if something else happens, I'll let you know. I'd been driving since early morning, trying to make it from Minneapolis to my sister's place in Montana before the weekend. It was supposed to be a quick winter trip. Just me, my old but trusty Subaru, and some crappy gas station coffee. Everything was fine until the snow started falling once I got a little further north, and into the more isolated parts of the highway. It wasn't too bad to start, just some light snowfall here and there, but it ramped up pretty quick around the time the sun went down. It became almost a wall of white that even my headlights were having trouble cutting through. After an hour of this, the road was fully covered in snow, to the point where it was really hard to tell if I was even staying on the road. With how stressful it was, I told myself I'd pull off at whatever the next place was, so I could wait out the blizzard. Once I decided that, I think it was 15 minutes later that I barely saw a light on the side of the road. It was snowing so hard I couldn't even read what it was before turning in. The parking lot was small, but had 3 cars in it. One noticeably buried in the snow, and the other 2 looked like they'd pulled in not long before me. I parked, and from there I could see from the shape and look of the building that it was some kind of roadside cafe. I was hoping for a motel, but figured if I was going to be stuck waiting here anyway, I might as well head in and grab some more coffee. I got out and walked through the blizzard. I hurried inside, nearly freezing already. This definitely wasn't the kind of place I was used to, or ever been to before, being a city person, so I felt very out of place. It was a very small, old-fashioned cafe with a bar near the front. 2 men were sitting there with coffee, and 1 woman working behind the counter. When I opened the door, though, it was very quiet inside. None of them were talking or anything. However, they all looked over at me and greeted me right away. Felt like I walked in during an awkward silence or something. I thought I was just overthinking it, though. I sat next to the men. Turned out both the guys had the same idea as me, pulling in to escape the blizzard. I ordered a coffee from the woman working there and took the mug over to a seat by the front window, watching the snow continue coming down outside and covering our cars. I also had a weird feeling about one of the men over at the bar. He was older, maybe 50, and the best way I could describe him is that he looked half dead. I don't know if it was from the weather or boredom, or if he was just having a bad day. Strangely, after I left and sat at the window, all the conversation stopped again, and the place was quiet, just like it had been when I first walked in. We all sort of sat there in silence for a few minutes, before suddenly one of the men got up and said something about trying to reach his nearby cabin before the roads get closed. Nobody else said anything. I watched him through the window, walking out to his car and getting in. He sat inside there for a minute, probably waiting for it to warm up. Then the other guy also got up, and without saying anything, left the cafe. I moved from the window back to the bar, immediately asking the worker what was up with those guys. She shrugged, saying they pulled in around the same time, and looked like they were arguing in the parking lot before coming inside. From there, they didn't say much of anything. Figured it was just road rage, or something like that. I stayed at the bar for a while, talking to her about the blizzard, and just a bunch of small talk. Over those 30 minutes, nobody else walked into the cafe. Eventually, I made my way back to the window to check on the snow and see if it had settled a bit. That's when I saw both of the men's cars still there. However, neither of them were inside the cars, or outside the cars. They were just gone. This immediately sent a chill through me, because it had been a while since they left the building. No way they were out in the blizzard for that long. I went over to the front door for a closer look, then decided to take a few steps out and look around. The sharp cold instantly hit my face, and the snow, while not as bad as before, still made it difficult to see. Aside from the harsh winds, it was quiet out there. No signs of either of the men. It actually gave me a really uneasy feeling, to the point where I wanted to leave. I dragged my legs through the snow to my car. Plan was to turn it on and let it warm up while I waited back inside before leaving. But it wouldn't start. Not like it was struggling to start, though. It wouldn't even turn on in the slightest, or make any sounds when I turned the key. It had only been maybe 40 minutes since I'd arrived at the cafe, and my car hadn't had a single issue before this night. My gut knew one of the men had something to do with this. I know maybe at this point that sounds crazy, like I was being over-skeptical from the jump, but I just knew it somehow. And then, as I sat in the seat, still trying to get it to turn on, I saw someone. One of the men walking out of the woods behind the cafe. He wasn't much more than a dark figure covered by the darkness and the blizzard of snowfall, but he was heading back toward the cars. I quickly got out and rushed inside, turning the lock on the front door. The woman asked me why I did that and what was going on, to which I quickly explained and told her to call 911. She seemed unsure, but did it anyway. A minute later, the man showed up at the door. He tried to walk in, pressing on the door. When he realized it was locked, he made eye contact with me through the glass and banged on the door. His eyes were bloodshot, and his face was pale, but he still had that half-dead look. Through our eye contact, and the door being locked, I think he knew that I was onto him, or whatever the hell it was that was going on. He didn't stay more than 10 seconds before running to his car. When the cops made it, only 3 cars were in the parking lot. Mine, the woman's, and the other man's. The creepy guy made it out. Unfortunately, this night didn't end on the typical he got away before anything happened. The officers followed some faint tracks in the snow into the woods behind the cafe and found the body of the other guy. None of his things were missing, though. It looked like it was just an act of violence. And just as disturbing, his car wouldn't start either. They found that it had the exact same issue that my car had, which was the ignition line being deliberately cut. So with all that info found out, the story pretty much told itself. When both men pulled in that night, at some point the creepy guy cut the line to prevent him from leaving. Then he just waited for him to head back outside, where he then followed him out, and of course, with the car not turning on and there being no escape, he was either dragged into the woods or had tried running away. Regardless, it all ended the same. And with the heavy winds from the blizzard, me and the woman inside had no clue any of it was going on, just 20 feet outside the front doors. But at some point during the 30 minutes before I noticed anything, the man had also cut the line on my car, which likely means he had the same plans for me that night. I was able to make it safely to my sister's place, but aside from a few phone calls to check in on me, I never heard anything about the man being found. Don't think I'll be going on any road trips around winter again, though. And thinking about the image of that man walking out of the woods through the blizzard toward me, now knowing what he truly intended, still gets my heart racing. This was around Christmas time last year. I think between Christmas and New Year's. I was back in my hometown for winter break from college, but I still had bills and stuff, so when I wasn't busy with family, I did some door dashing. It was snowing this night, but not enough to pack the roads to the point it was dangerous to drive. But it was enough for most people to not want to leave their houses to get food, so nights like these were great for making decent money. Orders were going fine up until 10. Things slowed down, but I was still getting consistent orders. This one was just like any other, except maybe slightly further than usual, 20 minutes away. My hometown was small but spread out, so lots of places were scattered on the outskirts in the woods. However, when I pulled up to where I was supposed to deliver this order, I was a bit unsure about it. The directions had led me off the main road and onto a smaller forest road, eventually to a spot where it looked like there was supposed to be a gravel driveway, going deep into the trees. But it was completely snowed in. Nobody had plowed or shoveled it, and I couldn't even see any lights, like porch or outdoor lights, in the forest. I stayed in my car and called the customer, thinking there might have been something wrong with the address. He answered right away. The man sounded like he was mid-30s and a heavy smoker, with that deep, raspy voice. I said I was at the spot on the map he had marked to drop the order off at, but that I didn't see an open driveway, or house, or anything. The guy said it was probably covered in snow. The way he said it was like it should have been obvious. I responded, saying I think I see where the driveway is supposed to be, but that I wasn't comfortable driving my car through it. He then gave some snarky answer about this was why he ordered delivery, and if I wasn't going to deliver it, then what the hell was the point? I didn't totally agree with that, and it seemed like a really douchey response. But in the moment, I guess I just folded and said okay. I didn't want him to cancel the order or give me a negative review, especially not after I'd already driven all the way out here. Looking back, I've checked all the rules and stuff, and now I know that if I don't have access to the driveway or delivery location, then that's on the customer. At the time, I wasn't sure. So after he hung up, I got out with the order, locked my car, and started walking through the snow. It wasn't super deep, but with it being on a less maintained forest driveway, I think my car would have had a lot of trouble and probably gotten stuck. And it was really hard to tell where the actual path was. I mostly just tried to follow what I thought was a clearing in the trees, but with no lights around to guide me, I didn't really know where I was walking. I kept looking back behind me at my car, seeing it get further and further away. It was my only sense of distance I had because up ahead it was really dark, and I couldn't tell where I was going. It all just looked like the same forest. And all of a sudden, there was a sound to my left. A crunch that sounded eerily similar to a boot stepping in the snow. But it was far, like just barely in reach of my hearing. I looked out there, and even tried turning my phone light on, but it did absolutely nothing. I didn't see anything, and didn't hear anything else, so I kept walking. The cold started getting to me, and the endless darkness ahead had me rethinking everything. I figured by this point I would have seen the house, or something at least to tell me I was going the right way. I stopped in place and stood there for a second, just having a moment of realization that this was all really odd. I looked around, and I know it sounds stupid, but it took until then for me to think that there might actually not be a house here. Like this was all just some sort of weird trick to get me out here. Which was absolutely terrifying to think about, standing there alone in the snowy, dark forest. I took my phone out and decided if the customer didn't answer, or tried again to convince me to keep walking, then I'd leave and cancel the order. I pressed call and held the phone up to my ear as I listened to it ring. It rang twice before I saw something in the corner of my eye. I turned my head, seeing a light far out in the trees. Then it suddenly shut off, and a half second later, the call dropped. I didn't even bother waiting or trying to think anything through. I immediately started sprinting back the way I came. The crunching snow beneath me covered whatever sounds could have been coming from behind me, like if the guy was chasing me or not. Probably made it even more terrifying, not knowing what was behind me. I ran all the way to my car, and before I even made it up to the door, I saw something was wrong. It was leaning on one side, which led my eyes to one of the tires being flattened. He had slashed it. I got in and started it anyway, driving out of there. I called the police on my way out, but aside from some questioning, they were kind of useless, and really didn't seem to take the whole thing that seriously. To me, I think it's pretty clear that the guy was leading me out into the woods for a reason, and even went as far as to slash the tires on my car to either keep me there or keep me from leaving. I don't know what I would have found had I kept walking into those woods, or what would have happened.